Hey everybody, Jeff here with a special edition of Balloon Time. Today we are going to be making an uninflated creation. Now for those of you that have never heard of an uninflated creation before, they look something like this. This was actually a competition piece I entered at the Twist and Shout convention last year. But it doesn't have to be that big. I mean, they come in all different shapes and sizes, and they're just so cute. And uninflated creations are, just as the name says, they're made out of not blown up balloons. Typically, I use my scrap balloons, so that way I don't have to use brand new balloons, and I'm reusing and recycling some things that otherwise wouldn't really get used. And they make really great gift ideas, just like the one I'm going to show you today. So for today's tutorial, we are going to be making an uninflated balloon wreath. Another thing to mention about uninflated balloon creations, because there's no air in them, they last a lot longer, years even, compared to a standard inflated balloon creation like a dog, which might only last a couple of weeks. So without further ado, let's get started on today's video. Okay, so first things first, let's take a look at what we need for this project. The first thing you're going to need is a pair of scissors. You're going to want to make sure they're fairly sharp, and I know these have a rounded edge to them, but if you have a pair that is pointed at the end, that would be even better. Precision is key here, kind of. The next thing we're going to need, obviously, is balloons. For this I use scraps. So these are balloons where I only needed half a balloon, I take off the rest. And you're going to want to get some 160s and 260s in green. You can use 360s if you want, but I find 160s and 260s to work best. And I am using key lime green. Let's see. I'll get some more in there. The next thing you'll need, and this is important, is a bottle of rubber cement. It usually comes in this ambered color bottle, and it has the tip here. And this is what's going to be used to keep all of our pieces together, the pieces of the wreath. One thing I will mention about the rubber cement is it has a very strong odor to it. So make sure you work in a well-ventilated area, or make sure you take breaks every once in a while, as this can really get to you. But we're going to set this aside for now, and we're going to focus on the balloons. What you're going to want to do is take your balloons and prep them. So if they have a nozzle on them, trim off the nozzle, and save that for a later project. And if they have tips on them, you can cut off the tips, and save those for a later project as well. Once you have all those laid out and organized, we can get started. Okay, now that we have our balloons sorted, it's time to start making the building blocks for the wreath. And I'm going to be using my precision scissors here, but as long as you have a sharp pair of scissors, you're good to go. Now, first things first, this wreath only uses a single building block, but you're going to need a lot of them. Let me show you what I mean. This building block is going to give us the needles of the evergreen wreath, but we also need a solid point to connect them together. We don't want to glue each individual needle, so here's what we do. Take your balloon, and you're going to tie a knot in it. Start it as a loose knot, so you want the knot to be very loose, and then what you want is this tail part, this tip, you want that to be about a thumb's width. So you're going to move the knot, and you're going to tighten it until you get it to be about a thumb's width. That's a little too much, so we slide the knot up. Okay? We keep sliding and tightening it all the way. If you have more, that's perfectly fine. You'd rather have more than less. Then we take the knot and we're going to trim the balloon just below the knot, giving us this. This is going to be the start of the building block for our wreath. You're going to do this for all of the balloons that you have here. So for example, I'm going to keep going here. I'm going to do this again. And you're going to do it for all of your balloons. You're going to do it for your 160s and your 260s. You're going to need a lot of them. So get a little dish or something here and start going. Okay, and here you go. I have two different containers. These are the 260s, and these are the 160s. I separated them because, well, obviously they have a different diameter, so they're going to be a coarse needle, I guess you could say, and a fine needle. The 160s are going to be used for detailing. We're going to put those over there for now, and we're going to focus on these. Now for the final step of the building block. We're almost done, but we need to make the needles of the evergreen branch. So here's how we do it. You're going to take your scissors and you're going to cut into the 260, and you're going to cut little sections, and it's almost going to look like a broom. Cut them just like that, and then once you get to the end, trim that one a little bit, and you get something that looks like a little evergreen branch. Needles. We're going to do this for all of the 260s, and then we're going to start laying them in place. So I'll get to work on that, and you guys can get started too, and then we'll come back in a little bit. Okay, and here we go. You can see it kind of almost already looks like an evergreen wreath if we leave it like that. If you look at it very close, you can see them. They all kind of look like that. But we're going to position them in a way that they look a little nicer. Now, another thing you can do that's optional here, you can get a contrasting color green. I think this is forest green. Fashion forest green, and you can cut them up and make the same building blocks that we made with the light green. And this will add a little bit of texture to it with a different color. Okay, now let's get down to building the actual wreath. Now, this part can get a little sticky and messy, so you're going to want to make sure you have something down on your table, either a mat or some newspaper or something like that. And then for the rubber cement, you're going to want to get a toothpick or a bamboo skewer or something like that. Start by taking one of the building blocks and positioning it so that you're pinching the pine needles so the knot is sticking out. Then, and this is important, get a very, very small amount of rubber cement on your toothpick here. And you're going to put a little bit on the edge of the knot, just a little bit, and then get another building block, and you're going to take the knot of that building block and attach it to the one that we have. You're going to have to hold it for a couple of seconds, and then you can let go and they'll be stuck. Which is good, that's what we want. And then you're going to continue doing the same process, a little bit of rubber cement on the edges of one of the balloon knots. Take another one and hold it there for a couple of seconds. And you're going to do this with the rest of your building blocks. You want to make duplets. Now we're only using a little bit of rubber cement because really that's all you need to get them to stick together. And the less rubber cement that you use, the quicker that they'll bond. Another important thing to note is that some of these are going to be different lengths. So you're going to see this one right here is fairly short, but this one is pretty long. That's okay because in the end we're going to be trimming these. We're going to be giving the wreath a trim, so to say. And it's better to have them longer than shorter. It's a lot harder to add more, trust me on this one. Okay, I've let these sit for about 10 minutes just to make sure they're completely solid. It's not necessary, but better be safe than sorry. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be gluing these in a chain. So we're going to be gluing it, we have the 2 here, and then we glue 2 like that, and then we glue 2 like that. So you can see it makes like a line or a chain of these. And we're going to do maybe about chains of 8, and then we'll see where we get after that. Just like we did with the 2, you're going to dip it in a tiny bit, get a small amount on your brush, and then put it on there. And then one thing you'll notice is some of the knots will go together naturally. So you'll see that one fits right in there. And the key to gluing is you want to make sure these knots touch with as much surface area as possible. That's going to ensure a solid connection. Okay, so here we go. We have our sections, and now we can close up our rubber cement because, as I said, that tends to get a little smelly. Also, it will start to congeal, I guess you can say, if it's left to the air. So go ahead, do that. You can clean off the tip of your toothpick or throw it out, get a new one. And now let's start planning the layout for our wreath. Now, when planning your wreath, you want to consider the size that you want to make it. My wreath is going to be going on, it's going to be for a gift for a friend. So I'm going to have a box, about maybe like a, 8" by 8" by 8" box. And I want something to go on the top, but I don't just want to use a bow because everybody uses a bow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make maybe, I would say a good size wreath about that size. Of course, you can make yours any size that you want. You could also make a cute little, maybe like a $50 or $1 size one, and that would still be very nice. Anyways, pick the size wreath that you want and start planning out the pieces. You'll kind of notice as you're gluing the pieces they might curve a little bit, and that's perfect. That's exactly what we want because that's going to help us make a better wreath. If they don't curve, don't worry. You can always curve them when we fine-tune it. So you see something like that. Now we have the outside of the wreath done, but the inside, you can see all those balloon knots, and we want to take care of that. So here's what we do. There's a couple of ways that you can do this, but my favorite way, and this way will require more building blocks, but I really like it because it hides the knots well. You take one section of 8, just like this, and you put the knots facing one way. You get another section of 8 and put it a little ways away with the knots going in the opposite direction. Lastly, you take a third section of 8 and you're going to put it going straight up and down on top of those knots. And you see it makes a nice little wreath there. Now, these are set fairly loosely, so it looks fairly large, but if you position it like so, you see you get a nice little wreath. And again, it does look big, but remember, we're going to be trimming these pine needles. An alternative option, if you don't want to use 3 of these back to back to back, because as I said, that does take a lot of resources, you can stagger them. As you can see, one of them by themselves doesn't really stand out. If you just have one, I mean, it makes an okay wreath, but it doesn't look as full as it could be. So here's what we do. We take it and we overlap them just a tiny bit. So you see right here, it overlaps a little bit. There and there. We take the next one and we place it over the overlap of where we did the second one. So now the front looks like that. It's not as full as the first method, but it's still, it looks good, and you don't have to make as many building blocks, which is the tedious part of this project. The other thing you'll want to consider at this point is if you want to put in colored accents or 160 accents. if you're going to do that, do so now. You take an individual piece and you might glue it in on a certain spot. And the same thing with the 160s. If there's any spots that look bare, for example right here there's a little bare, you're going to trim this the same way we trimmed these, and then you're going to put it in where the spots look bare. Okay, so we did the detailing and texturing. You can see I added the 160s and I also added the forest green here. And the nice thing about doing that is it adds a little bit more volume to your pieces. The two techniques I showed you previously, the stacking and then also the triple layering, those are great if you have a larger wreath. If you're going to make a large one of these, you know, maybe something like that. Like that. But if you're going to make a smaller one, something to fit on a box or some jewelry, you can just texture them and make them a little bit thicker, and that'll work good. And now it's time to lay out the pieces before we glue them up, because we want to make sure it looks good before we glue. So this is what the wreath is going to look like. Just like that. Now you can see it's a little bit smaller than I originally wanted, but after looking at the box that it's going to be going on again, it kind of needs to be a little smaller. It was going to be too big. So I scaled it down a bit, and I think that looks good. I might add some more building blocks around here and around here, but for now I'd say we're ready to glue up before we do the final detailing. After you do your final layout and you think it looks pretty good, if you see any bare spots, you can do that now, or you can do it after you glue. It's up to you. Sometimes it's easier to see the bare spots when it's all together versus when it's in pieces. Separate the pieces you're going to use and line them up in the circle fashion that you're going to have them. And then each of these open areas, you're going to glue the pieces together. When you're gluing them, make sure you don't glue them like this, but instead glue them like this, because this is going to be the face of our wreath. Okay, and here we go. Here's the final result. I'll pick it up so you can see here. This is the wreath. I glued all the parts together, and I had one leftover section. So what I did is I picked that apart and filled in some of the empty areas, and I also took some more 160s and cut those up and filled them in, and I just reinforced the back a little bit with very small amounts of glue. You want to be careful about the glue, the rubber cement, because if you put too much on, it'll cake up and it'll look a little funny. And now that you have your wreath, you can do a lot of different things with it. You can put it on a box as a decoration in place of a ribbon or a bow, which is what I'm going to do. Or you can get a little bowl, turn it upside down. You can put the wreath on top, and you can put a little advent candle coming out of it. Or you can do what I'm going to do, and you can put a bow on it. And that's how you make an uninflated balloon wreath. Like I said, they make excellent gift ideas. You can put it on top of a gift as an accent, or, I mean, you don't have to make the wreath like the bow that I made. You could scale that up and put that on a gift box. The possibilities are endless. You can even take the building block that we learned today and make it with a variety of colors, like a rainbow, and you can make like a nice little pom-pom on the top of a box. Much like balloon twisting, the only limit here is your imagination. So yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and I really hope that you give this a try. I'm sure, you know, someone in your family or your friends or somebody you know might like a gift like this, so I really hope you try it and I hope you like it. Well, that's gonna do it for me for today, guys and girls. I also wanted to let you know I have another video coming out tomorrow that's another holiday video that you might find useful as well. So I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!